I'm Christy and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you've never been here before. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking and sharing all of the historical romance releases of 2022 that I have read. So I have about 30 plus, around 35 new historical romance releases from 2022 that I have read for the year. So I think it's safe to say around here that you know that I love to dive into authors' backlists, but I also like to keep up with current releases as well. And I think majority of this list, all but maybe like 2 of them, I did read ARCs for, or advanced readers copies. So reading ARCs is something that I love to do. You get the books ahead of time. Like right now we're in November of 2022 and I have already been reading books that come out in 2023. So it's a great way to get early access to books from publishers, authors, marketing teams. And I know I personally like to read them as soon as I can, just because I like to form my own opinion about the books and get them before maybe everybody else has read them, and form my own thoughts and all of that before the hype comes around. So this list is by no means a complete list of every single historical romance that was released in 2022, but I thought this would just be a fun way to share. So as always, if you ever want to see more of my thoughts and my full reviews on any of the books I talk about, I do review every book I read, and you can find the link to my Goodreads in the description of all of my videos. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into the books. So I've kept these in publication order of kind of when they came out. So we're going to start at January at the beginning of the year. So first up is The Siren of Sussex by Mimi Matthews. So this one I actually ended up giving 3 stars to. This one read more like historical fiction. It is a closed door romance, which is what this author writes. So the couple in here, like, they only kiss. That's all that they get to. So the heroine is a blue stocking equestrian and she needs to rescue her family from ruin. So she knows she's going to need to attract a suitor by standing out. So she decides to stick to her 2 strong suits, which is horseback riding and haute couture. So I did like the rep in this one. The author actually pulls from her own Indian heritage. So the hero in this one is actually half Indian and he's a tailor in London. And so he's too English for the Indians in his family, and then he's too Indian for the English. This one, we don't see a lot of the dialogue. We also don't see a lot of the things happening until after they've happened. We're told about them. So I did want a little more depth and connection to the couple. Next up is The Lady Timpson Heir by Harper St. George, and this is the 3rd book in her Gilded Age Heiresses series. So this series follows the American Crenshaw family, and the hero is the heir to the Crenshaw Iron Works family business. And the first 2 books in the series were actually the hero's sisters' books. So in those books, we saw that the Crenshaw parents, they were actually bringing their daughters to London from New York to try to find them suitors. And the hero has been holding down the New York offices while his parents and sisters are off in London. So on one of his visits to London for one of his sister's weddings, he actually met the heroine of the story. And they even spent some time traveling together to Scotland while he was trying to search for his sister in the previous book. So now it is months later and the hero's father has actually become ill, and so he wants his son to marry by the end of the year, or at least be engaged to, you know, think of the family legacy. So since the hero has been busy focusing on the family business, he decides a fake engagement is the only way it's going to make that happen. So he ends up asking the heroine, since she's really the only woman in his life and they already share a mutual attraction to one another, and he finds out that she actually needs help as well. So the heroine is actually a widow and she doesn't want to marry again. She really just wants to focus on her charities, but she is realizing without the support of male backers for the finances to open a new charity, like, it's not going to be happening. So I really enjoyed this one. I really love an arrangement of convenience relationship, and that's what this was, and so I gave this one 4 stars. Next up, I read 10 Rules for Marrying a Duke by Michelle McLean. So in this one, the heroine's older sister actually married below their rank, and so she put their family's reputation in ruin and has since harmed their younger sisters of a chance to marry. So now the heroine needs to restore the family's reputation and marry well, and she really needs to preferably marry a duke and super fast. So the story starts off with her purposely falling into the arms of the hero, who is a duke, when they're outside of his house to get an invitation into his home. So he quickly realizes that she's not injured and ends up asking her, like, what's going on here? And so she actually really quickly tells him her plan. So she says that if he will marry her to help out her family, she will provide him an heir and then let him go do whatever he wants. So they set out with 1 year to achieve the goal and 10 rules to stick to. This one is fun if you're in the mood for a lighter, shorter read, and I thought it was a good book to begin with as well if you're new to historical romances. A fun moment in this one is that the heroine is actually bookish and she wears glasses. Next up is The Good Girl's Guide to Rakes by Ava Lee. And this is actually the first book in her Last Chance Scoundrels series. So this one, I really like the premise for the entire series. Basically, it is 3 friends, the 3 heroes who end up getting books in the series. They're being forced to find themselves brides within a year or face getting cut off by their families. So 2 of the heroes in the series are brothers, and then one of them is their friend. So this one starts off at a wedding. 2 of the brothers are there at the wedding to see their best friend marrying their sister. But when they see that their friend is kind of up there with cold feet, they actually end up helping him run away from the wedding. So of course this doesn't go well with their families, and this is when they end up getting punished with that you have to marry in a year or face getting cut off. So the hero in this one is the third son of an earl, and he's just known about town as a rake. He's secretly a romantic at heart, and he actually writes poetry as well. So he ends up enlisting the help of his best friend's younger sister to kind of help him get in on the good crowd, get invited to the best parties, and find like marriage-minded women. So in exchange, she tells him, well, then I want something too, and I want to be able to go to all the like disreputable, scandalous places and like see what everybody is up to there. So in this, the heroine's father actually kind of came from nothing and kind of made a fortune of leasing warehouses to shipping companies. And so now he wants his daughter, the heroine, to kind of uphold the family's reputation in society. So he's wanting her to marry well, and that definitely does not include the third son of an earl. This one I really enjoyed because the heroine is a bit of a rebel, and then the hero has actually always been overlooked as just, you know, the third son of an earl, like he's not important to anybody. So I like the message in here that sometimes your family is the one who knows you the least, and I like seeing these two together. So I gave this one 3.5/4 stars. Next is How to Be a Wallflower by Eloisa James, and this is the first book in her new Wallflower series. So this is a new series following 3 ladies who actually want to become wallflowers, but despite all of their best efforts, they actually end up getting thrust into the center of the room. So in this, the heroine has been managing her own fortune for years. She actually inherited her father's commodes business. So when her mother passes away, she actually ends up getting in contact with a long-lost grandfather that she never knew, who's actually a viscount. So she finds out that one of her mother's last wishes was for her grandfather to help her enter into society. The heroine, of course, is determined to stay a wallflower. She doesn't want to marry. She doesn't want to do any of that. So one day she ends up going to a clothing emporium to be outfitted as a proper wallflower. And she overhears the business owner kind of lamenting the fact that a American business owner wants to take over his company and send it to New York. So the heroine steps in, she outbids the hero, who is the American businessman, and she becomes an investor to make sure that the business stays in England. So this one, they kind of start off as business rivals, but they actually become friends along the way. He's smitten with her from the start. I thought the romance in here was a bit lacking, as we're told a lot of things that happen off page, and I would have liked to see that on page instead. So a fun moment for this one, if you love Eloisa James's My American Duchess, then characters from that make appearances in this book, because the hero of this book is actually best friends with the heroine of My American Duchess. So he even stays with her and her family for quite a bit of this book, and it's like a decade after her book is when this book takes place. So yeah, this one was okay, and I gave it 3 stars. Next, I read To Marry and to Meddle by Martha Waters, and this is the 3rd book in her Regency Vows series, which I have read the whole series. This one, though, I gave 3 stars too. So in this, the heroine has had 6 unsuccessful seasons, and after spending her whole life trying to fit into society's standards and just being agreeable, not causing a stir, she is ready to cause a scandal. So she ends up marrying the disinherited, scandalous son of a marquess. So due to her father's large debts, the only suitor that she has had her whole life has been this like odious gaming hell owner. So the hero is actually there one night, and he overhears her father and the businessman talking, and he decides to step in and offer a marriage of convenience. So he wants to not only help her get away from this gross old man, but he also wants to help out his own business as well, which he actually owns a theater, and he wants some like reputable prestige for it. So this one, they get married really quickly into the story, like less than 15% of the book, they're already married. I did like that the hero really loves his theater. He never wanted to be an idle gentleman of the ton, like he wanted a job, and so I really liked that. His family wanted him to sell the theater to not ruin his sister's reputations, but since he refused, that's when he actually got cut off by his family. So since his father disinherited him, he kind of became the black sheep of the family. So the heroine has issues with her family as well. They've always just wanted her to be like a society darling and kind of fit her into this mold that she is not. So this one, I really enjoyed the theater aspect of it all. The heroine really becomes involved in the hero's daily life and wants to help out with his theater business as well. This one is a really light, low angst read if you enjoy those. There is a fun moment in here when they actually rescue a kitten together. Next up is The Marquess Makes His Move by Diana Quincy. This is actually the 3rd book in her Clandestine Affairs series. And this one I gave 4 stars to. I really enjoyed it. In this one, the heroine is London's most renowned map maker, but no one knows it's actually her making the maps because her husband is actually the one getting the credit. And then in this one, the hero is a half-Arab Marquess, and he actually ends up posing as a footman in their house. So this one has the hidden identity trope. It's actually not revealed who the hero actually is until 70% into the book. I liked seeing the hero and the heroine form a friendship along the way. There's definitely some secrets and things that are revealed as the story goes along, and I just really enjoyed it. I think Diana Quincy's writing is just really easy to consume, and yeah, this is one that I definitely recommend. So 4 stars for this. Next, I read An Affair by the Sea by Erica Ridley. This is part of a 4-book series collab that she did with Grace Burrows this year. All 4 books in the series are pretty short, and they all take place in Brighton, in this really picturesque little inn on the seaside called Siren's Retreat. So legend has it all who crossed the threshold of the retreat actually end up finding love. So each story in this is a standalone, and they're all about 100 to 200 pages each. So in this, the hero has actually been a successful private solicitor for over a decade, but he's really bored with the law and he wants to actually become a chef. So at 33, he ends up quitting his job and heads to the inn. So on his first day in the town, he actually ends up seeing a sign of a shop for sale across the street from the inn. And when he's walking across the street to go find out more about it, he actually ends up almost getting run over by a carriage. And that's how he meets the heroine, because she is in the carriage with her 2 nieces. So the heroine was actually orphaned when she was a little girl and taken in by her uncle and her family and kind of treated as just the help. She had to become the governess and the chaperone for her nieces. So with her 30th birthday actually right around the corner, she's actually finally going to be able to gain her own inheritance, and she kind of just wants to slink away into spinsterhood. But her life actually gets thrown upside down when her 2 nieces actually think that the hero is her long lost suitor that she actually made up to them and told them that she's been writing letters to all of these years. So the hero matches all of the very detailed descriptions that she gave about her fake suitor all of these years. And the hero and her kind of decide to just go with it. And so they decide to have a fake relationship while they're both in town. This one was just really delightful, a very whimsical read. This one was really fun. The heroine actually has a game in here where she composes music on the fly or in real time. The hero in this one as well, he actually uses a walking stick to get around, since as a child he got an infection that actually paralyzed his limbs and caused his legs to grow at different rates. So that one I gave 3.5 stars, and I thought it was cute. And then I read Love Letters by the Sea, also by Erica Ridley in this series, and I gave this one 3.5 stars as well. So in this one, the heroine is a widow who actually owns the inn, Siren's Retreat, and when she's not running the inn, she also secretly writes letters in an advice column. So her and her late husband were actually the first to experience that true love at the Siren's Retreat when the legend came about. And so now with her husband passing away, she just really doesn't think that lightning's gonna strike twice and that she'll ever find love again. But lately she's actually been consumed by letters by this mysterious pen pal, and so they've been writing back and forth to one another. But of course she can't focus on the letters, can't focus on a romance, because there's a heartless, calculated businessman trying to take over her inn. So the hero is the trusted man of business for the powerful lord who wants to take over the inn. And so the hero arrives in town to scope out the place, figure out what's up with it, meet the owner, and see if it can be turned into a gaming hell. So when the hero arrives in town to scope out the place, he actually sees the heroine and falls for her upon sight. So during the day they actually can't stand one another because she doesn't want anything to do with him, and then by night though they're the ones exchanging the secret letters back and forth. So I love this little secret pen pal situation. This one has a very low angst, low steam as well. Next up is Crying Wolf by Kerrigan Byrne, and this is the 5th book in her Good Girls series, which Kerrigan Byrne is one of my all-time favorites. I have read all of her historical romances. So this one I gave 3.5 stars, and it is a compromise marriage of convenience situation. This one has an age gap as well. The heroine is 21 and the hero is 36. This one the heroine lives with her sister and her brother-in-law, who is Sir Carlton Morley. And so the heroine likes to sneak off into the neighbor's house that has a telescope that she can go look through. So on one night she is over there, she has snuck in to use the telescope when the American new owner of the house, the hero, actually finds her. So after their little run-in, the heroine actually ends up running away and escaping, running back to her house. But the hero actually thought she was like a thief in the night, and so he actually ends up following her back to her room, and they are discovered together in her room alone together. So when they get discovered by a guest in the house, her brother-in-law Morley has to step in, and he's like, hey, everything's fine, they're actually engaged, it's not a big deal. So once the guest leaves and believes them, Morley actually tells the hero hey, this family has been through a lot lately, we really don't need another scandal, can you just go along with this? So this whole series is really short, they're just about 200 pages, so I'm always left wanting a little bit more, which is why I gave it 3.5/4 stars. So there are some fun moments in here with the heroine. She's actually into astrology, and so she discusses constellations and mythology with the hero. Next up is Rules for Engaging an Earl by Jana McGregor, and this is the 2nd book in her Widow Rules series. So this series has followed 3 women who actually all found out that they were married to the same man upon said man's death. So the heroines all banded together and became friends, and so far we've been getting each one of their books. So in this one, the heroine is pregnant, and she actually needs a husband quickly to save herself and kind of her child's reputation as well. So she reaches out to her childhood best friend and asks him to help her / marry her. So they were best friends growing up and were really close until they were about 17 when the hero actually ended up getting a special assignment for the crown and going off to war. So he made her promise back then not to wait for him, and it has been 10 years since they've seen one another. So the hero was a top marksman, and he actually got injured in the war. So now not only is his career over, but he was left with a badly injured leg as well. And he just has a cold attitude about life now. So this one definitely had Beauty and the Beast vibes with kind of that cold, isolated, injured hero who just wants to stay in his house, spend time with his dog, like forget everybody else. It has the meddling butler and staff as well, trying to push the heroine and hero together. So there are some fun moments in this one. The hero actually had to kind of piece together his own shower because, for him to be able to bathe. And so he introduces the heroine to a shower for the first time. And there's also some really sweet caretaking in here once the baby is born, because he'll be like, let the heroine sleep in, like I'll get up at night and stay up with the baby. So next up is a novella by Kerrigan Byrne, and it is The Earl on the Train. This is part of her Victorian Rebels series, but this novella was actually first released in the Big Duke Energy Anthology, which that whole anthology was made up of novellas from different authors for like long-awaited romances. So this one is the long-awaited romance between Sebastian Moncrief, a former pirate, and Veronica, a widowed countess. Sebastian and Veronica's romance was first hinted at in The Duke with the Dragon Tattoo, which is the 6th book in the Victorian Rebels series and my favorite. So I've been waiting for this romance for so long. This novella takes place right after the events that went down in that book. So this one, Sebastian ends up boarding a train with plans to kill a man on board, but he ends up running into Veronica, who is there as a chaperone for the man's daughter. This one was a very quick romp on the train novella. I did want a little bit more just because I was waiting for this couple for so long, so I gave it 3.5 stars. Next is A Daring Pursuit by Kate Bateman, and this is the 2nd book in her Ruthless Rivals series. This one I gave 5 stars. It is one of my favorites. This one is an enemies with benefits situation. So in this series, the Montgomery and Davies family have been feuding for generations, and so all of the romances kind of have that enemies to lovers vibes. So in this one, the heroine has spent the past couple seasons just doing whatever she can to kind of try to avoid marriage. So she's known for her very like outrageous outfits and her carefree attitude, and that's all kind of a front because she's trying to hide some secrets that she actually has. So the only one who is actually able to see through her act is the hero, and he is her neighbor and from the rival family. This one, they've both been secretly pining for one another for years, which I loved. And so at the beginning of the story, when he finds her in a scandalous position, he actually assumes the worst about her and propositions her. So he says that he'll show her all the delicious things that she's going to be missing out on if she avoids marriage, and for 1 week for him and her to just give in to their desires together. This one, there's just so much history between the characters. I love the trust that they have with one another. So there are some fun moments in here as well. There's a week-long house party at Wales, which is where they grew up, and then the heroine is super into animals. Next up is The Bride Goes Rogue by Joanna Shupe, and this is the 3rd book in her 5th Avenue Rebels series, and I gave this one 5 stars. I've read everything that Joanna Shupe has written, and this is definitely one of my favorites. So in this one, the heroine and the hero, their fathers were actually business partners in the past, and so they always had arranged for their children to end up marrying one day. So the heroine has been anticipating this wedding for a while, and so at the beginning of the story, she ends up going to the hero's office and is like, hey, like, can we make these plans happen? Like, I want to get this wedding rolling. And so when she gets there, he's actually like, I never took that seriously. Like, we were never gonna get married. Like, what are you thinking? So she's definitely feeling embarrassed and hurt by it all, and she decides, you know what, like, I need to go out. I'm gonna go have a scandalous night. Like, what was I waiting for this whole time? So she ends up taking off to a scandalous masquerade ball. So at the masquerade ball, she ends up hitting it off with a mystery man, and they share a scandalous time together, which of course a few days later they actually realized that it was one another that they were with. This one has amazing chemistry, there is a hot carriage ride, and just some emotional moments in here that really delivered. Next up is 4 Weeks of Scandal by Megan Frampton, and this is the 5th book in her Hazards of Dukes series. So I've read this whole series, and there are definitely hits and misses in there for me, and this one was one of the misses. I gave it 2.5 stars. So in this one, the heroine actually fled from her home when she was 14 with her sister, and now they own a gaming club together. When she ends up hearing of their estranged father's death, she actually ends up heading back to the small village where they grew up because she's like, surely our father at least left us our childhood home. So when she arrives there, the hero is actually also there to claim the house as his, because he says that his father actually won it from her father in a gamble. The hero and the heroine decide to spend a month together trying to find the rightful owner, so they're like searching through papers and all of these things. But the townspeople get to talking, and so since they are in the house together, they actually decide to tell everybody that they're fake engaged. In this one, I really loved the hero. I thought he was great, but the heroine I actually had a problem with, like her interactions and the way she treated the hero was just not it for me. I also felt like the steam in here, like I'm all for some steamy times, but there are some books where like the steam doesn't jive with how the characters are the rest of the book, and this is how I felt with this one. Like it just felt like it really didn't fit the way that their characters were. There are some fun moments in here though, like the heroine is the one who makes the first move, and then the hero, he studies Greek mythology, so he shares like some mythology and stories with the household. Next up is A Caribbean Heiress in Paris by Adriana Herrera, and I actually ended up giving this one 3 stars. So this one I love that there is a business savvy, headstrong Dominican heiress as the heroine. So the heroine at the beginning of the story ends up setting sail to Paris with 300 casks of her family's rum. and she has a mission to get to Paris and expand her family's 3-generation business. So when she gets there, she realizes that she's having a really hard time with business people trusting a woman, and especially a woman of color. And so she ends up actually meeting the hero. He's a Scottish hero, and he's taken with her right from the start, and they actually end up having a marriage of convenience to help out with her business. This one was all right. I just wasn't really ever pulled into the characters, and so I didn't really believe their romance, so that's why I gave it 3 stars. Next, I read A Matter of Temptation by Stacey Reid, and this is the first book in a new series from her. This one I gave 4.5 stars, and I really loved it. This one is set in Victorian era, and the heroine and the hero actually meet when the heroine poses as her twin brother in a duel that he is supposed to face off against the hero. So the heroine and her twin brother, who is a viscount, they've been living in dire straits for quite a while. So her brother is quite desperate for money, and he's tempted to cheat at cards while playing one night with the hero, when instead he has ended up facing a duel the next day. So the heroine knows that she is better at fencing, so she sneaks off in the night, complete with her brother's clothes and wearing a wig, to go and fight the hero, the Earl. So when she ends up winning the duel, the hero is so impressed with her that he actually ends up offering her a job without ever realizing that she's a woman, which of course, once he does find out, he's like, hey, this job still stands, like, I want you to work for me. So she ends up becoming his secretary. The hero is just very blunt and direct, so he comes off a bit cold and starchy, but he's very passionate about politics and social reform of the time, which I really enjoyed seeing. He also feels super strongly for the heroine, and it's like an unknown emotion to him, or like feeling, and so he's so confused about these feelings he's having for her. And so it was fun to see that the heroine is actually the one trying to keep the hero at bay from her. So this one is filled with some hot, swoony moments from the hero. The heroine's life actually gets in danger when they're on the road one day, and so she decides that she needs to start living it up and experience all these things that she never experienced before. A fun moment in here is that the hero is very studious, and so when they are about to get together, he ends up grabbing some study materials and reading books to make sure that the heroine is going to be satisfied when they get together. Next up is A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. I gave this one 5 stars. It is one of my favorite releases of the year. So this one is a really beautiful, emotional, character-driven historical romance between a trans heroine and then her war-injured hero best friend. So the heroine used the war as the perfect time to kind of fake her own death and start living life the way that she always should have lived. Then the hero has been really haunted by Waterloo and the loss of his best friend, and of course his injuries as well. So he has kind of sequestered himself away at his estate. So it's been 2 years since the war, and the heroine has been working as a lady's companion for her sister-in-law when she overhears that her best friend, the Duke, is like really suffering and just really filled with grief. So she really wants to be there for her best friend, and so they actually end up going to his estate together, and he doesn't realize who she is at first, and so this one was just really sweet to see. This one is full of angst and pining and friendship and just like all the emotions. This one was a bit long with some like exterior conflict that I wasn't super pulled into, but otherwise a great read. Like I said, 5 stars and a favorite of the year for me. Next up is Up All Night with the Good Duke by Amy Rose Bennett, and this is the first book in a new series from her. This one I loved. I gave it 5 stars. So this one, the heroine is a respectable finishing school teacher by day and a gothic romance writer by night. And then the hero is a widowed single father who really wants to marry again, get an heir, and have somebody help him out with his Spitfire teenage daughter. So he actually has a few run-ins with the heroine when she actually propositions him. She wants his help in staging her own ruination to get her aunt off of her back about marrying, because she really wants to focus on opening a women's college, and so she tells the hero if he helps her out, then she'll help him with his teenage daughter. But things don't go quite as planned, and in the moment, instead of just ruining her, he actually ends up proposing. This one I just really loved. I loved the amazing chemistry and the banter between the couple. I loved their conversations and the honesty from the hero. I really enjoyed seeing the heroine's conversations with his daughter as well, who secretly reads the heroine's books. Next is Always Be My Duchess by Amelie Howard, and this is a Pretty Woman-inspired historical romance retelling. This one I actually ended up giving 3 stars to. So this is a class difference romance with a ballerina heroine and then the cold Duke hero. So at the beginning of the story, the heroine finds herself without work, and then the hero actually ends up propositioning her, and he's like, hey, will you become my fake date at this ball I have to attend? So he needs her to attend a ball with him where he can prove to the current landowner that he is not an eternal bachelor and that he has plans of settling down. So when it actually ends up going so well, he decides to extend their agreement and asks her if she'll pose as his fake fiance. This one I wanted a little bit more from the romance and the chemistry. The middle of the story did definitely kind of drag for me. It's very lust at first sight, but it does have that fun premise. And then in the author's note at the end, the hero is actually described as neurodivergent. Next, I read Nobody's Princess by Erica Ridley, and this is the third book in the Wild Winchesters series, which I have adored the entire series, but this one, sadly, I gave 3 stars to. So in this one, the hero deciphers a series of codes in the scandal sheets, and he thinks that he's coming to the rescue of a royal. So he ends up meeting the heroine, who is the companion to the princess of her country, and the heroine has always dreamed of becoming the first royal guardswoman. I found the romance in here really lacking. The hero and the heroine actually don't spend a lot of time together in the book, so I never really saw any sparks between them, and once it does come to the declarations of love, I just didn't feel like it was real. This series as a whole, though, has a really amazing found family, and so I will continue on in the series. Next up, I read A Duchess by Midnight by Charis Michaels. This is the third book in her Awakened by a Kiss series. I actually ended up giving this one 2 stars. So this whole series is a spin on fairy tales, but instead of the usual characters getting their HEAs, this series actually gives those overlooked characters their HEAs. So this one is a Cinderella-inspired story with one of the stepsisters getting her HEA. So in this one, the heroine is a reformed mean girl, and she wants to open up her own business of kind of coaching young debutantes. She wants to help out all of those like outcasts with their first season. So then the heroine's sister, the princess, actually ends up asking the heroine for help with one of her husband's old army friends' nieces. This one, like I mentioned, I gave it 2 stars. It was a very insta-love with a very little development of the romance. And this one just took like quirky to a whole other level. Like the conversations and the things happened in the story were just so out there and bonkers. There were some good moments though. I mean, the cover is gorgeous. I really liked that the heroine was into insects and bugs. And I think this book actually did have really good info for somebody new to historical romances, because it really showcased how society and seasons and like how proper ladies are supposed to behave. Next up is The Return of the Duke by Lorraine Heath. This is the third and final book in her Once Upon a Dukedom series. This was not my favorite in the series, sadly, but I loved Lorraine Heath overall, and she's one of my all-time favorite writers. So this one has the spy espionage trope. The hero was actually once the heir apparent to a powerful dukedom, but after his father was actually found guilty of this treason and like assassination plot against the queen, their family was stripped of everything, like their titles, their estates, their funds. So the story picks up 1 year after the hero's father was hanged for the treason. So the hero is still really mad about it, and he decides that he wants to find out who his father was conspiring with, because it definitely couldn't have been a lone man project. So he sets out to find out who his father was conspiring and working with, and wants to take them down as well. So he ends up arriving at the heroine's house, and she's actually the presumed mistress of his father. And so he wants to know what she knows about what his father was up to. This one, of course, not everything is as it seems, and it's very heavy on the espionage plot. I found the romance to be very lacking though. But of course, like I mentioned, I love Lorraine Heath, so while this wasn't my favorite, I was living for all of the moments of seeing characters from all of her other series make appearances. Lorraine just has an expansive universe, so I always love seeing all of her characters. The hero in this one, his sister and brother both have books as well. Next up is Heartbreaker by Sarah MacLean, and this is the second book in her Hell's Bells series. I have read everything that Sarah MacLean has written. This series has not been my favorite. I've given both books 3 stars. So in this one, the Bells are on a mission to keep a certain lady safe. The heroine is one of those Bells who has to keep her safe. So when the said lady that they're supposed to be protecting ends up taking off to Gretna Green to elope, the heroine actually ends up following. And the hero, who is actually a duke and a brother of the man that the lady is eloping with, he takes off as well too, because he wants to make sure his brother is protected. So in this one, the heroine actually grew up as Princess of the Thieves. Her father is like a gang lord. There were a lot of fun moments in here. There is a road trip, only one bed. Hero falls first. There's some caretaking and nursing back to health scenes. There's a highwaywoman and action and adventure, secret identities and family secrets. Like, it's filled with so much. I thought the romance was really good, but all of the action and everything that the Bells was up to, I could have done without. Next up is Much Ado About Dukes by Eva Devon. This is actually my favorite that I've read from this author, and I gave it 4 stars. So the heroine has joined a Bluestocking League, and she actually ends up writing like political pamphlets. And the hero is the brother of her cousin's betrothed. So the hero is a duke, and the heroine wants to hate him just on that fact alone, since he stands for everything that she's against. But they actually realize when they spend some time together that they have a lot in common. So they're actually starting to become friends when the heroine actually finds out from her uncle, who is her guardian, that her entire inheritance is gone and she needs to marry quickly. The hero overhears and offers her up a marriage convenience. So they both do want to keep love out of the relationship, but both of them are like, lust is on the table, like it's starting with our wedding night, like we're gonna give in. Next up is The Hellion and the Hero by Emily Sullivan, and this is the 3rd book in her League of Scoundrels series. This one so far, I've read the whole series, and the first one is still my favorite in it, but this one was okay, and I gave it 3 stars. This one, if you enjoy Persuasion by Jane Austen, you'll probably like this one because it is inspired by that. So this one is a second chance romance between a widowed heroine who is actually running businesses and making enemies along the way as she fights for fair wages for her employees. The hero is a former fortune hunter turned naval officer turned private investigator who the heroine's brother hires as the heroine's bodyguard. So in this, the heroine actually ends up starting to receive threats, and that's when the heroine's brother hires the hero to be her bodyguard. The hero supposedly loved the heroine 8 years ago in the past, and so there is that second chance. There's lots of bodyguard moments, lots of my lady talk, and then of course what happens in Monte Carlo stays in Monte Carlo. Next is The Duke's Accidental Bride by Ava Devon, and this is a novella. This is a brother's best friend romance, and I gave it 3 stars. In this one, I thought it was fun that the hero is actually the matchmaker and tries to find the heroine a husband. When they get caught during some kissing lessons, they're actually forced into a marriage of convenience themselves instead. Next is To Catch a Raven by Beverly Jenkins, and this is the 3rd book in her Women Who Dare series. I gave this one 3.5/4 stars. In this one, the heroine comes from a long line of grifters and thieves, and she couldn't be more proud until she actually has to help the government. So she has to pose as a housekeeper to the man who supposedly stole the Declaration of Independence, and she's tasked to find out if he has it and then of course get it back. And then the hero is set up in the house as well, and so he has to pose as the driver and actually as her husband as well. So this one has that fake marriage situation, a little bit of the spy story as well, and there's actually a secondary romance in here as well between the hero's father and the heroine's mother. Next is The Duke's Rules of Engagement by Jennifer Haymore. This was actually my favorite book that I've read from this author. The heroine in this is London's hottest up-and-coming matchmaker who just loves love, but she knows at 27 she is definitely on the shelf. So her new client is the hero. He's a duke, and he just needs the perfect duchess to be his bride. So he comes to the heroine for help, and then he's flabbergasted when she tells him that she only does love matches. So they actually start spending some time together and start enjoying their time together. There are some fun moments in this one. The hero is into meteorology and rowing, and so he actually also builds his own boats, so he shares that with the heroine. He takes her rowing, he shows her his charts for meteorology, just lots of cute moments. And so I gave this one 4 stars. Next up, I read How the Wallflower Was Won by Ava Lee, and this is the 2nd book in her Last Chance Scoundrels series. So this one I gave 3 stars to. So in this one, I really love the hero. He's actually down to 8 months to find a bride before he's cut off by his family. He doesn't think very highly of himself, and he actually thinks he'll have a better chance of finding his friend a bride instead. So he even tries to set up the heroine of this book with his friend, but of course that doesn't go well. So this one, the heroine is a blue stocking wallflower, and she's trying to get into this intellectual society, but they do not take unmarried women very seriously. And so she asks, if I'm married, will that make a difference? And they're like, yeah, maybe. So she's like, you know what? I need to get married quickly as well. So this one, they get married really early on into the book. The hero actually has a learning disability as well with reading and writing. This one, I just never really felt like there was anything in the way of keeping the couple together. They're already married. They're already enjoying one another. I felt like the heroine was not that great. I really didn't like the 3rd act conflict and how she overreacts in that situation. But so that's why I gave it 3 stars. Next is Duke Most Wicked by Lenora Bell. This is the 3rd book in her Wallflowers vs. Rogues series. I love this book. I gave it 5 stars. This is a class difference romance between a duke and then the heroine, who is actually the music teacher for his sisters. This one grabbed my attention and broke my heart, starting off right with the prologue. Thero's father treats him horribly growing up, so he decides that he's going to become the world's worst duke and sets off to just do all these disreputable things. So we cut to 16 years later. He's now the duke. He's having financial troubles, and he is in charge of taking care of his 5 sisters. And a sticker just fell out. So he sets out to find a rich bride, and along the way he's like, you know what, I should find grooms for all of my sisters as well this season. So the heroine actually is really close friends with his sisters, and so she's like, hold up, that's not happening, let me help them out. So she tells him that if he'll allow his sisters to attend the season, she'll go there and be their chaperone and make sure they stay out of trouble. So this one I really loved. I loved seeing that the hero and heroine, the more time they spent together, the more that they wanted one another. I loved how music played a part in this. I loved the angst between them and the banter. I loved her relationship with his sisters, and then with her father as well, who is a composer and he's losing his hearing. There are some fun moments in here as well, with a proposal involving gravestones and then a custom-made bench for some steamy times. Next up is The Duke in Question by Amelie Howard, and this is the 3rd book in her Daring Dukes series. This is actually my favorite in the series, and I gave it 4 stars. This one is a spy historical romance with a diverse cast and diverse setting, which I've really enjoyed the whole series for. This one delivers on the steamy times. They are excellent. There's also a transatlantic journey to the US. There is a political assassination they're trying to stop. The hero in this one is a duke. He's a former spy master. And then the heroine, she actually has some secrets and spy activities of her own going on. And then lastly is A Wicked Game. This is by Kate Bateman. This is the 3rd book in her Ruthless Rivals series, and this one actually comes out in the end of December. So this one again is that Montgomery and Davies family that have been feuding for generations. So this whole series has followed these families, and in this one, the heroine, her cousins have been the hero and heroine of a book, and then the hero, his sister and brother, have been the hero and heroine of the book in the series as well. So in this one, the hero and heroine have grown up with one another, and they've definitely teased and bet one another over the years, but they both kind of been mutually pining for one another, but they don't, share that with one another. another. So when the hero actually has to head off to war, the heroine definitely wants him to safely return, but she can't say that. So instead she's like, you know what, if you come back safely, like I'll give you 3 kisses on your return. So the hero returns 2 years later after being in the Royal Navy. He was actually imprisoned for 6 months as well while he was gone. So he comes back with a new mindset that he is ready to have the heroine in his life, in his bed permanently. So the heroine in this one is a cartographer, and she works in her map making business with her father, and she has always just longed for adventure and to explore the world of the maps that she creates. And then the hero, he comes back to claim those 3 kisses, but of course he tells her that she never specified where they were going to be on her body. So this one I gave 4 stars to. Is definitely a great one in the series as well. So those are all the 2022 historical romance releases that I read this year. Hopefully I didn't leave anything out, but if I did, there was plenty in this video for you to check out. But go ahead and let me know in the comments if you've read any of these ones, if any of these are still on your TBR that you want to get to, or maybe what one of your favorite historical romances that released this year that you read was. I'd love to chat about it in the comments. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one.